I only have one idea of having a really good session. I didn't do it this year. It will happen eventually. I'm going to dress up in a pink bunny suit, run my session, and that's going to be the last session I ever do. Because there's no way nobody is going to hire me again as a presenter. It will be a fun session, though. So that's what I'm keep threatening people with. This session is about OMS. When I submitted this session, they immediately asked me, can you do another session on OMS as well? You know, kind of more of how you actually use it. Yes, so we decided to do 2 sessions. This one is about getting it up and running, because without that, everything else is pointless. You really need to have the agent out. You need to have it correctly configured. You need to have it collecting data and things like that. But there's always ifs and buts. So, number 1, Johan always tells me, if you're not on Twitter, you need to get on Twitter. I'm telling you the same thing. You're either in or you're out. If you don't follow people on Twitter, you're going to miss the train. Worse, you don't even know you're going to miss the train because you didn't even know there was a train to miss. So you don't know anything. You're going to go. I meet those customers sometimes. I mean, it's not you, right? But I meet those customers. You go to the customer and they haven't seen light in like 15 years. It's like they really believe that Windows 2000 is the latest and the greatest. And they haven't seen anything else. And they are developers. And they go like, yeah, after Windows 2000, it's like the year 2000. Like, the year keeps on coming, right? Never heard of it. Hyper-V, what's that? I actually had that on, I was a TechEd a couple of years ago. There was a guy coming up to me and saying, you know all this chat about virtualization? Yes. What is that? That's 2 years ago, and he didn't know what virtualization was at all. You don't want to be one of those guys that I'm telling stories about in the next conference, so be on Twitter. You don't need to follow me, follow someone that actually knows something. The ones I usually follow. So the question is, why should you have OMS in the first place? A lot of customers I work with are afraid of the cloud. It's like being afraid of death. Eventually it's going to happen, so it really doesn't matter. But when it comes to OMS, it's a reversed cloud. You're not really keeping any data. So even if you're afraid of the European Union data protection rules or whatever, everybody has laws. I think Google is the coolest company ever because we had a conversation with them and they said, there's something wrong with the Swedish laws. You need to change them so we can sell our product. You don't mind changing the product so it fits the law. No. You need to change that law because it's incorrect. A lot of companies that are afraid of the cloud actually can use and should use OMS. Because the only thing you do is you use the power of data mining in the other end, which is the hard part. Anybody run an operations management server locally? Does it consume SQL Server power? It doesn't. Is it turned off? I mean, I remember the first MOM system I actually built. Like, you need a SQL Server. And then you size it, and everybody says, whatever you size it for, double it up and add some. It's like, but that's going to be the most expensive computer we have in the entire environment. Yeah. It's going to consume more than everything else. And it's just for monitoring. It's not just for monitoring, it's really good monitoring. I mean, it's going to know things you didn't even know that you could know. But now you know that. Like, your CPU has been over 92% for about 15 minutes. Is that good or bad? I have no idea, but I can tell you that. like a jiffy. So OMS is different. OMS is about telling you what you should do. And it needs to still collect a lot of data and do calculations and present information for you. So this is not a demo system. So this is actually a customer that doesn't know this. I thought I actually installed the agent last night, so they have been running for a day. We're going to hand it over to this customer. It's an internal customer, so they allow this, I hope. Anyway, I think this is a really good example of what I mean, if you do an OpsMgr, right? OpsMgr is nice because it could really tell you that Active Directory is working or not working. Well, or can it? Now it's going to tell you what it's, I can replicate data between these two domain controllers within the time I'm supposed to replicate data. So if that's the rule, I can say, yeah, it's going to work, right? But does Active Directory really works? Depends on how you define it. This is much cooler. Because the difference here is that I don't really know exactly what it's testing. I can figure that out. But this is really meant for CEOs, for management, right? I'm managing your Active Directory. Oh, it looks great. Yeah, but I can see a red one there. Yeah. Do you want me to fix it? Yeah. It says I need to do a backup. And I think it's really cool because you get scores, right? This gives you 2.1. So this is, because now you can hire idiots. And this is like clickbait. If you fix that, you're going to get 2.1 likes. Oh, God, I'm going to do it immediately. And they can have a competition and things like that. It's just easier for people to see if it's good or bad. You still might need other operations manager like application, or this needs to be better. But it gives me the overview. And the overview is pretty nice to have. I like this particular much. I like this actually. This is really cool. I'm going to show you this really fast. If you check the system update assessment, it says it's blue, right? 0 needs attention. That's good, right? Malware assessment. It's also blue. 100% needs attention. So is blue good or bad? Well, in this case, it's kind of easy because blue in this case is, since most people really don't have an antivirus on their servers, it's going to be green if everybody has that, but nobody have that, so everything is blue. And well, you can just take a picture and then you remove the needs attention, and then you're done. So that's kind of cool. But if I go here and change to another customer, anybody have websites? I mean, traditional websites like any websites? Anybody have a website? Anybody heard of a website? Anybody seen a website? We have websites. The websites we have here are remote desktop connection websites. They are not really websites. It's logging on sites. It's gathering data sites. It's more technical stuff. It's not really websites from that perspective, but they are still websites. And I actually love this. This is so insane. What you're actually seeing right now is the number of, that's the IP addresses that are doing connections to our websites. And go like, why? What is that? That, my friend, is something you don't want to have. Because when you start figuring out who they are, you see that they are a member of a botnet, a configure botnet member. And this is the power of having data sent up and analyzed, because this is something, well, you could fix this on your own, but basically you're going to be, here's a bunch of IP addresses. What are they? I have no idea. And then you need to start figuring out that, and at the time they are either gone or replaced with something else. So in this case, we can see it's our remote access server, our gateway server, which just happens to run a website, and they are trying to infect it 600 times every day. That's kind of, so what could I do with this information? Could I ask, could I do an SMA job? Could we add this IP address and block it? Could we? It's pretty easy to deal with this information and do something about it. So there's a lot of things you can do with this, and we're going to come deeper down to it later on. Number one is to actually install the agent. And go back, we're going to go to home. I need to find another workspace so I don't mess this up. I can also create a new one. It's going to be Lab Center again. Here we go. By the way, I didn't have any more PowerPoint presentations, so we're done with PowerPoints, right? Or does anyone want to have? But I can. Maybe you can do PowerPoint in the end when everybody else has left. I just hate PowerPoints. It's just boring. So number one, you need to realize that somewhere down the line you need to pay for this, but you don't need to do that in the beginning. Up to 500 megs of data is allowed per day, and they never charge for it. So what happens when you cross the line? Are they going to start charging? Nope. They just stop receiving data. So there's no analysis of the data anymore, which is fine because it's a test. Anybody work as a consultant in here? Okay. So a good way is to, for free of charge, you help the customer set this up, and then you add yourself so you can see this information. And then you just add basic stuff like security. And then you call the customer a week later and say, I can see you have issues. Would you like to keep the issues, or would you like me to fix them for you? There's a very few number of customers that says clearly, we would like to keep the issues. Actually, I haven't heard one saying that. You should add a customer so the customer has their own account, and then you add yourself as a co-admin to that. That's why I can see multiple sites. Here you can see what's actually going to cost you. In this case, I'm collecting security logs. Yeah, that's going to cost me 4.5 gigabytes, wire data, log, stuff like that. So it's pretty easy to see where the money is. When it comes to charging, it's not that expensive, but it depends on the customer's contract. So you need to ask the customer. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, we need to have agents. And we can have multiple connections. Okay, so here's the three connections you can have. You can either deploy the agent manually without configuration manager, without operations manager. It doesn't give you everything, but it gives you a good portion of information. But it doesn't give you everything. If the customer doesn't have anything, then having something is far, far better. Installing OpsMgr is something you need to plan. Installing OMS agents is something you can do unplanned. Well, you need to plan it. You need to kind of download a file, which is kind of a plan, right? So you either connect it here, or you download the agents here. There's 32 and 64. Currently, there's an agent for Linux. It's still in preview. We expect it to be released any day soon. And if you do have Azure, you can also connect it to an Azure storage account. The agents themselves are pretty small, no fancy. You also need to have the workspace ID, you need to have the primary key, and you need to have the secondary key. So you need all these keys. When you have that, and you downloaded it, then you need to, well, there's two ways to install this. I'm going to let you pick. 600 servers. You RDP into each server. You then copy the file into each server. You double-click them, and you type in the keys every time. Okay. You want to have the other option? The other option is to run PowerShell. And it looks like this. Not that like that, but pretty much like, yes, that's a much better choice. In this case, we have a configuration file. I like to store configuration in XML files or in comma-separated files. Data is over here, logic is over here. Just makes sense to do it that way. So in this case, we have customer folder structure. I can show you how just slightly. And yes, I do need to generate the keys, since you can copy these and you can steal them and you can, and then you can install an agent. And I can see your data, so I'm really scared. The reason why I did it this way is because this is one application. And for everyone that has some kind of imagination, would it be easy to add other agent as well, maybe like the Azure backup agent, or maybe you need to install a prerequisite or something like that. So it's block-sized in that way. And then we have an engine to actually deploy it. So we need to find machines in Active Directory. In this case, all these machines, customer name. So if I just run this, it's going to give me back boring information on where the files are, and so on and so on. If you go to the files itself, the folder, it says, I only have the 64-bit version of it. It's not that big, 28 megs. But we need to copy the darn file to each machine. So we have a function for that, which basically does one thing only. Take the file, copy the file, put it in a folder that I know of. File is copied. Then we have another function that installs the file. Nothing fancy at all. Just runs the file and returns the return code so I can see if it was successful or not. Most of these agents are, how should I put it? They are environmental friendly. They don't use very much ink, meaning they don't tell you when they don't work. They just don't work. So in best case, you get an exit code and saying, 4, thank you. Then I know. Great. Pleasure to have you here. And then you need to log and check the log files and things like that. So I really need to have the exit code. And so we have those 3 functions. We also have another function that checks the install. I would like to see if the agent is up and running. There's a couple of things that you need to understand. And for instance, it doesn't like multi-homing. Okay? So multi-homing is out of the scope. Multi-homing is an old way for OpsMgr to have like 2 OpsMgr servers, and the agent has the ability to communicate with both of them, right? Doesn't like that. So if you do have OpsMgr, can't have that. So I was installing these agents, and it's like, I can't install on this machine. Why is that? Don't lie. I don't like multi-homing. Okay. But there is no OpsMgr agent installed. Yes, it is. No. There's no agent installed. There's actually no agent whatsoever installed on this machine. No, I can't install it. It's can't do multi-homing. Many years ago, there was an agent installed. And you can still see traces in the uninstall registry key. There is no software on the machine, but there is an uninstalled registry key. So you need to make sure that you don't have any old agents installed, meaning check software installed, check for files that are leftovers, check for uninstalled registry keys. You need to scan all the machines. Also, make sure that there are no pending reboots on the machines. That's the preparation you need to do for any software install. And if you're a consultant, you make sure that happens a week before you are actually arriving to the customer. So at the customer, you deploy the agent. And while you're taking a cup of coffee, the first kind of data is actually ticking in. Otherwise, it's going to be like, yes, thank you so much. Now we need to restart all the servers. Okay, when can we do that? Next summer? Great. So we can see any kind of result like next year, maybe. So running this is not very complicated. The silent command is, and there's multiple ways of doing this. I've noticed that the safest way to install these kind of applications when you run them using remote PowerShell commands is to fire up a command prompt. So we run them cmd.exe/c, and then we run the setup. That way, I'm always guaranteed there's a complete command prompt setup in the other end, meaning that all my command lines usually works the way they're supposed to. Is it possible to run setup.exe directly? Yeah, but then we don't have the command prompt, and there might be things that doesn't work the same way. Yeah, but isn't that very old style, running a command prompt? Yeah, I run a car, and the car I have goes on gas, and gas are really old dinosaurs. But it still works. And it's fun, so I don't care. It's old. Add blah, 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 workspace, command line, and then we need to have the workspace ID, and we need to have the agent ID, and we need to accept the end user license agreement. And if we run this on machines, let's see if we can add some. Maybe I can. What happens if we do? Let's see what happens if we do that. We need to run the functions just to have them. And how many machines do I get from that? So let's get everyone. That was 125 computers. Let's see if this can be a fun day. Weird things happens. I think we have. Let's run on this. See what happens. It could be one of them that I didn't change the name for last night. So get the servers, run the night, command line, da 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 da. As you see, I'm doing a massive ping testnet connection just to verify that the machines are online. And you do that in one row. So you test everything, and then you get the return back, and then it's copying the file to all the machines. No, I haven't published this script, but I assume that if I don't do that, someone will hold me at the airport anyway. So yes, it's going to be published later on this afternoon. It's going to take a while before the agents are sending data back, but after they are, you're going to be able to see all the data that comes in. But you also need to add configuration. For instance, the Windows performance counters are not enabled by default. Do you need to have them? Well, you can't get real-time data, but you can get near real-time data, meaning I can do performance monitoring with a delay of about 2 to 3 seconds. Is that good enough? Yes. I can see things going on in the environment. I can see memories increasing. I can see disk I/O is moving across the data center. So that could be something I need to enable. Do I have Linux systems? Oh, yes, I do. Okay, maybe you need to add the selected performance counters as well, and you need to specify them. Maybe you have IIS logs. So you want to see all this, even if it's not a real web server, it's the gateway server, it's, you know, the technical stuff. Yeah, I want to grab that as well. You can also add custom fields. You can have currently 100 custom fields. There's a reason for custom fields, and I'm going to come back to it later on, but that is something you could add as well. Maybe you want to have syslog. Maybe you want to add that as well. So you need to configure that as well as this. If you're the only one that can see stuff, it's kind of pointless. We actually need to see it, all of us. So we can add different account types. It could be a Microsoft account, Microsoft support account, an administrator or a user, you just add them. You can also add an organization. This is a space that is not connected to anything, but it could be because you're running Azure, an Azure Active Directory. So you connect this to Azure Active Directory, and then you can use an Azure Active Directory account to log on to that workspace. But you can also have a private workspace. I'm not sure the private workspace is going to run for much longer. It's harder and harder to log on with a private user account. You go like, really? You should have Azure, you know that. Yeah, but I don't have that. Okay, okay. For this time only. There's always going to be preview features. In this case, I have 2, alerting and alert remediation. They are constantly adding new features to this. And this is the fun thing with OMS. Every time I log on, and I at a customer, I'm supposed to do a demo, I always find myself slightly stupid because I go to my solution gallery and I go like, oh, here's a new one. And the customer go like, here's a new one. And he's supposed to be an expert. And he didn't know there's a new one here. No, because they keep adding them like every day. So even if you're in here every week, every day, you're going to have the, they added this new feature. I didn't see that. Twitter will tell you that that's the only location. And you can see there's a bunch of packs here, right? 80 replication status. Okay, so let's add that. That's cool. It's free. I like free. The only problem is that if there's something called free, eventually something is going to have another name for it. Alert management, Azure Network Analytics, containers, SQL, AD, malware, change, tracking. So which of Do you need them all? No, you don't need them all, but you need a bunch of them. How many of you think you know anything about SQL Server? And you actually do. Because there's a lot of people who think they know a lot of things about SQL Server. Have you added the SQL Server assessment management pack? Because they have one. And when you do this, it just becomes not so good anymore. Because now when you go into the SQL Server, you go like, oh my God. We should have, there's a lot of things we should have, but we didn't. So I'm going to change workspace. And go to another location. I can pick that one. They won't kill me, I hope. Okay, so let's go into, I think we have SQL here. Yes. Our Active Directory looked good, right? Our SQL environment doesn't really look that great anymore. They recommend us to do a backup. Check. And other small items as well. Yeah, and okay. And if I ask a SQL guy about this, they go like, yeah. So if you so if you recommend us to do all that stuff, why isn't SQL Server configured that way from the beginning? I have no answer. For me, it's like, yeah. So most of us believe that when we install software and we follow the best practices guideline, which is obviously next, finish, it should be green, right? I mean, you installed Configuration Manager, it's just next, finish, and then it's done, and it's working perfectly. Anybody try that? It's just that we assume that we are doing at least some kind of okay, but we are not. So we have been using this. So is it all great? No, it's not. There's a lot of problems. Because this just gives you light. This gives you a way to see that stuff aren't the way they should be. I was working for a customer in mid-Sweden many years ago. They have a big data center. They used Dell servers at that time. And if you can remember the old Dell servers, they had like a blue Dell illumination button in the middle. And as long as it's blue, the machine is fine. When it's yellow, not so fine anymore. So I'm at the customer, and I'm walking in this giant data center, and a couple of thousand Dell servers, half of them, yellow light flashing. I know what it means. So I asked the guy and said, there's a bunch of machines that they are really broken. Like busted hard drives, memory error. I mean, it's broken. And he said, yes, I know. And that was the end of the conversation. 2 weeks later, I'm back working for the same customer, and we take the same stroll, and I say the same thing. And he said, yeah, I know. And I can't hold myself. It's like, but you need to fix it. I agree. We just don't know who to tell. But you need to know, don't you know who is the server owner? No. But you can check it up. Yeah, it's not my job. For management to work, the organization needs to be focusing on, number one, don't create issues, and when we do, permanently fix them. So this is not for an organization that runs around and say, hey, we're going to wait until that basket starts taking a really good fire, then we're going to put it out. Why? Well, I'm over here, I'm going to wait till it starts burning. Why don't you prevent it from being burning? Well, that's not my job. I'm supposed to be the guy that extinguished the fire. And since it's not burning, I'm going to start firing right now so I can be a hero. We had another customer with that issue as well, because they said, if we implement this, and we fix all the issues, yes, then nobody knows. Knows what? That we are fixing issues. No, but nobody have any issues. Exactly, and that's a problem. Really? Yes, because the guys that worked in help desk, they didn't want to fix more. They liked to be the hero. Isn't that weird? Well, it depends on where you are and who you are and how old you are. And if you're 10 years old and you're playing with cars and on the floor, maybe you want to be a hero. When you're 51, like I am, I don't mind being nothing anymore at all. It's pretty neat. Just I can vanish over here. So the problem you have is that for each and every solution you add, someone needs to monitor that. And someone needs to do something about it. Otherwise, this is pointless. It's like I have customers saying, well, you need to have a monitoring system for our email system. Okay, fine. What do you need? Oh, right now we have a server that pings the server. Okay, so if the server goes down, then you know the server is down. Yes, but ping is not good enough. So you want to what? You want to check that SMTP also works. Okay? How many users do you have? 25,000. Great. So let's assume that the email system is down. You already have 25,000 people that's going to tell you that. Why spend a second of fixing a monitoring system that will tell you exactly the same thing that everybody else is already telling you? The server is down. Yes, we know. What you really want to know is things like this. There is no backup running on this. Configure SQL Server instances and firewalls rule to allow communication, incoming connections, increase the number of data. Why should I do that? And here's an explanation. Here's an explanation that is good enough to be printed and presented to something that has the ability to make decisions, meaning the brass. Doesn't mean they make bright decisions, but at least they make decisions. Like, yes and no, thing, yes, no. But you can get this information. You can push it under the nose and say, hey, here's the problem we have. I need time to fix this. Because it tells me what I should do, what happens if we don't do this, what the effect could be, things like that. It also gives us 8.1 likes. So if you do have a like system internally in the organization, people will fight for this. This will be done much faster than this. This is just a 4.9. I want to do the 8.1. Anybody had a like system for this? I had one customer that had something similar to this. So every technician was giving, for everything they did, they were giving like points and scores. And it was like so weird. It's like US-based company. That would never happen over here. Who cares about points? I want money. So that's very simple. So it's about adding all these different solution galleries to the system to make it be exactly what you want to have. Some of these requires OpsMgr to work. So if we go back here, I have alert management here. Alert management is a plugin in OpsMgr Suite, but it does require OpsMgr to be integrated, otherwise it doesn't work. The cool thing is that means we can move the entire alert management from OpsMgr on-prem to the cloud. So now we can have everything that is bound to any kind of alert management can be up here, and it's easy to manage it over here. We only have like, oh my God. This is, by the way, a live production environment. And it's only the 7 days of data. Here we have some small issues. It's just the wrong integration version. This is actually a really nasty error. Anybody got this error sometime? Seen this? This is when you run Hyper-V. You run Hyper-V. Anybody run Hyper-V? Okay, a few of you have heard of Hyper-V. When you do Hyper-V, the System Center Virtual Machine Manager will gather all the integration components versions. The highest version is the latest. So if you add a virtual machine that has been running on a Windows 10 or a 2016 TP4 machine, then the integration version becomes higher than everybody else. There is no new version of the integration services components, but that is the highest version. Therefore, everybody else is old. Yes. So it's not always a great message to get this. But to make that work, you need to have OpsMgr. To make this work, you need to have OpsMgr and System Center Virtual Machine Manager, and you need to have OMS. This is something that we like very much. This is my primary key usage in the data center. I do run Hyper-V. I don't run VMware anymore. I will never do that again. And when we do Hyper-V, we also do private cloud design, meaning Fabric, meaning SMB3 storage, meaning everything, right? And when you do that, this gives me an aggregated view of every piece of storage I have, performance, bottlenecks, projections. So how many days can I run this cloud before this is going to end? Do I need to add more storage? Do I need to add more compute? Do I need to remove? Can I replace things? We just killed actually one 4-node cluster. We did it last night, I think. They had a barbecue back home, but the 4-node cluster. So you can see we had a through output that went up. This is the push-up we had for the time it took to move every VM from the old cluster to the new cluster. So it's not that big. It did bump up a bit, and that's because they were running on local storage, and we moved everything to SMB3 or shared storage. But to make this happen, I need to have them all. OpsMgr, Virtual Machine Manager, and OMS together. Otherwise, we don't have this connection. So if I go, let's see if I can find that. Let's try this machine. Oh. Yeah. That should be the one. try it the other way, around. Exactly, that's the one. That we need to solve in another way. Hang on, maybe I have it here. Open. I always have these files somewhere. There you go. And there you go. Yeah, whatever. See if we can open that up. It's going to be down here. There you go. Because of what? I just need to see that. Can we try it again? Surname. And that needs to be that. So thank you for waiting patiently for me to log on. The settings we have in Virtual Machine Manager is the connection. So in System Settings, there's a connection to the Ops Manager. And in this case, you can see it's green. There is no other configuration needed. This is the only connection we need to have between Ops Manager and Virtual Machine Manager. But we need to have Ops Manager configured correctly. And Ops Manager needs to be configured this way. Oops. Interesting. How can you even do that? I managed to do everything weird. Okay, let's try to do it that way. And move that way. And open this console. Because in Ops Manager, we need to do the integration. The integration is not really complicated to do. Well, I would say it's slightly complicated to do. Because you can't. You need to have update, roll up, there's a 6 or 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever, but you're going to have the latest one. Okay, so you need to install the latest roll-up update. And you also need to make sure that it really gets installed correctly. And sometimes it doesn't. You can see that when you go to administration. Because here you can see it says Operations Management Suite. And from beginning, it doesn't say that. It says the old name, which I even can't remember anymore because it was like 10 years ago. I changed the name 4 or 5 times for that. So it needs to have the other name. When that is fine, then it's easy. The only thing you do is that you configure it once. And since it's already configured, there's no run wizard again. It's a reconfigure, and it's very simple. You log on, and you say, this is the cloud space we want to do, and you're done. From time to time, this doesn't work. Then you need to manually log on using the traditional web browser and verify that you actually can log on. So there's no proxy in between. There's no funky translation somewhere. So because if it can't log on here, it can't log on, and then it can't do the connection. And that's actually the hard part. That is to do that part, do the connection. You need to have the correct management pack installed, and you also need to make sure that you can browse to that location. The other step is the easy step. In administration, in agent managed. Here you have all the machines. They need to have an agent installed, right? And installing an agent is just like every other agent you install. You can use PowerShell to install them. You can use command line to install them. It's just a standard OpsMgr agent. How do you add them? Well, you add them here. Add computer group. And then you search. And then you select them. Like that. And then you hit add and OK. Yes, you can script that as well. What you should do is, of course, this. If you are using OpsMgr, then you should have either a runbook or an SMA job or something that says if the OpsMgr agent is installed, then it should automatically be added here as well. I'm kind of conservative when it comes to monitoring. I used to be one of those guys that added everything. I just add everything, because if I can see anything, then I can do something about it. That's like when you're 15 and you want to have all the girls at the same time. When you're 51, you realize that's exactly what you don't want to have at the same time. Just one wife at a time is perfectly fine. And then you can have like a rest of that and get another one a couple of years later maybe. But you just want to have one at a time. It's too much information. You don't want to have that. Wives, I mean. I'm glad this is not recorded, right? Don't add anything. You add things that are supposed to be monitored, that you're supposed to react on. A typical example for really bad monitoring is adding like printer monitoring. I really had a customer who says, yeah, we want to have that. Really? You want to have an alarm every time someone opens the LED of the printer? Yeah. Why? Now, so we know that happens. So what's the action? Oh, we don't have any. That's the problem. There's pointless to see and know things if you don't have any action plans. It's like watching football. Why would you want to watch football? Oh, well, I can see if one of the teams is winning. So what's your action plan if they do win? Nothing. So why are you watching? If there's anything in the end that says drink beer or something or eat or I win money or then I get it, right? But just watching something and then it's done. It's like, what did you do? Spend 2 hours watching people running back and forth with a ball. Great. I also monitor printers. So, Add things you really need to monitor, absolutely, but just don't add for the sake of it, right? And do have an action plan. What are we supposed to do with this information? Just knowing things without doing anything about it? That's bad. I don't want to know if the planet goes under tomorrow, because I don't have a plan for that. So I don't need to know that right now. If I did have a plan, then it's another story. Questions? Anybody have questions or opinions? Or we do have questions, or it's opinion. Opinion? Okay.
In the OMS, is there a way to acknowledge, like an alarm? The SQL instance where if I use a third-party backup software and it says you don't have backup, can I say, yes, I have backup, so shut up?
So the question is there a way to acknowledge certain actions that happens? If you do have a backup, and the backup application actually does a backup, then OMS knows it's doing a backup. So I know what you're saying, but for antivirus, for anti-malware, for backup and things like that, all these applications that do it correctly, they are using APIs, and all the third-party vendors are using them. So it will says, yes, you do have a backup. So it doesn't matter what application I use for backup. So for instance, the reason why my system says I don't have a backup is because I don't have one. It's very simple. And the preferred method for this customer is going to be dumping to a local drive and have the system backed up as a snapshot backup. That's what we're going to do for this particular customer. No, not really, not today. But on the other hand, we can see that. I can't tell you that. But let's say this: we get email from Microsoft, a lot of emails, and they are asking us questions. And sometimes you can, by just reading the question, you know what they are heading with things. So, if the question would be, if you could do everything in OMS that you currently can do on your OpsMgr solution, would you prefer the cloud instead of having the local solution? Yeah. And if they ask that every MVP around the globe and they get like 99% yeah, do you really think they're going to keep the old one running? So whatever we don't have in OMS today, you're going to have either next week or the week after that. The important thing with OMS is that people that are using it are giving feedback. We need this to change. I need this to work differently. I would like to be able to do this. Otherwise, nothing is going to happen. They heavily rely on that. And you have the Microsoft Voice thing. You can go in into the website and say, I want to change this. So by all means. That was a good question, though. Any other questions? I do have a session on OMS tomorrow. It's going to be slightly deeper. We're going to do the log files. We're going to do analysis. And we're going to create our own queries and upload data and other weird things just to see how far we can go. Question over there?
Do you understand it correct that operation manager now is on a steady 60 miles an hour ahead?
So if you understand it correctly, the traditional on-prem ops manager is going to continue being exactly what it is, and nothing is going to happen with it. Yeah, something like that. Yes. So the plan is, the question is there going to be a new version? As far as we know, there's going to be a complete new generation of System Center products. System Center 2016 are going to be released this summer or after summer, autumn. I've seen a lot of them. They're good, but if you, and they're good from a standpoint that, and Microsoft most likely hate me when I say this, I really love them, because the only thing they did with them is fixed bugs instead of adding crap nobody needs. So they are really stable. They're really good. But if you want to have innovation and new features and new functionality, that's going to be in the cloud.
From Blue Stripe, it's going right to OMS instead?
So the question is, if you don't have anything at all, could you just do OMS straight up?
I mean, Microsoft acquired Blue Stripe. Blue Stripe.
Yes.
And the Blue Stripe.
Yeah, the Blue Stripe.
Yeah. What do you see any functionality leading from that into Operation Manager, or did it go to
That's not for me to say. But there will be other people that can answer that question. My time is up. Thank you so much for joining. Please fill out the evals. I'm going to be here if there's any other questions. Thank you.